Have you ever woken up after 8 hours of solid sleep, still not feeling refreshed, still not feeling energized for the day? Well, you're not alone. Millions of people struggle with sleep, and many of them are turning to sleeping pills to help with that. But they're still waking up feeling unrested, and that is really because it's not necessarily how long you sleep, it's how well you sleep. AKA, what I'm referring to is the quality of your sleep matters, and some of these sleep aids don't get you into those deeper quality stages of sleep. And you should really care about this because deep restorative sleep is how we prevent a lot of disease. In fact, poor sleep quality is related to a lot of heart disease, Alzheimer's, anxiety, depression, inflammatory conditions. Ultimately, if you want to live a long, healthy life, if you want to have great aging and longevity, you're going to have to prioritize the quality of your sleep. So getting those hours and getting deep restorative sleep within those hours of sleep is really where the sweet spot is. And that will really lend itself better to good energy throughout the day, better cognitive function, and disease prevention. But it's a lot easier said than done. So today I want to talk to you guys about how there are certain tools that you can use to help improve the quality of your sleep without the need for sleeping pills. And we will go over a little bit about why those aren't the best solution for most people. So if you can spend the time really getting into good quality sleep naturally or through interventions that actually help promote deep sleep, REM sleep, and stuff like that, you're going to be rewarded for it. And so today we're going to talk about technology and the use of that to help with people who struggle with sleep. But first, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Dr. Robin Lewis. I'm a naturopathic physician practicing in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and let's get into it. But before we get into things, I want to elaborate a little bit on what I mean by good quality sleep. So yes, you should be sleeping 7 to 9 hours on average. That is the range where most people will find their sweet spot. But within those 7 to 9 hours, you want to have different stages of sleep achieved. So generally speaking, when they talk about stages of sleep, they talk about REM sleep and non-REM sleep. There's multiple types of non-REM sleep, and deep sleep is a type of non-REM sleep. When we talk about sleep quality though, what most experts are focusing on is deep sleep and REM sleep. So these are the sleep stages that are a little harder to achieve and are more problematic in people with chronic insomnia. And so, for example, deep sleep is a slow wave sleep where you're between 0.5 to 4 hertz. So your brainwave activity is moving really slow. And this stage has been related to things like better detoxification. So this is where you're doing all the repair and detoxing. It's where we're consolidating a lot of our memories. It's where we're finding that emotional balance that sleep can provide us. So of course, if you're not getting enough of that stage of sleep, then you can start to see consequences there. Roughly speaking, you want about 25% of your sleep to be in REM and 25% to be in deep sleep. What is happening when people struggle with sleep and they don't get good quality sleep, they wake up completely unrefreshed, all of these things, it's because they're spending the vast majority of their time in light sleep. And that is just not as restorative. So generally speaking, we're trying to aim for those deep and REM stages because those are the ones that people tend to struggle with. And so that'll be, generally speaking, what they're referring to when they're addressing the quality of your sleep. Poor sleep is really ultimately leading to a lot of these big health diseases, and one that is a very obvious example is Alzheimer's. So deep sleep, for example, what studies have shown is even 1% increase in your deep sleep can translate to 2 to 3% decrease in the amyloid proteins that deposit in one's brain and lead to things like Alzheimer's. So that's just a 1% shift can have a massive impact on preventing things like Alzheimer's. And that's just one condition. So again, in case you didn't need any convincing, this is a very important thing to prioritize and try to dial in. But it then begs the question, why not sleeping pills? So if we think about some of the top sleeping pills a lot of people get put on, things like Ambien, Lunesta, benzodiazepines when things are really bad, Ultimately, the problem with most of these sleeping pills is that they knock you out and they don't put you into those deep stages of sleep. In fact, most of them actually suppress those deeper stages of sleep. So if we look at something like Ambien, it can reduce your deep sleep. Yes, it might get you sleeping more hours, but it has been shown to reduce deep sleep by around 40%. Lunesta, around 35%, and benzodiazepines, being really strong ones, typically only prescribed for the worst case scenarios, suppress your deep sleep by about 50% or more. And so that's why a lot of these people who go on these medications actually do have really bad health outcomes, is because they're under this false illusion that they're sleeping longer when really they're just being knocked out. There is a big difference between being unconscious and actually sleeping. Another common thing that people will say helps them sleep but really does nothing for the quality of your sleep is alcohol and even marijuana. A lot of people use that as a sleep aid, and yes, it will knock you out, but it does not get you into those deeper stages of sleep, which is ultimately where most of the health benefits are. Okay, so this really brings me to the technology portion, and I'm ultimately going to focus on how we can use things like the Muse headband to hack our sleep, to get you into deeper stages of sleep, train your brain how to fall asleep easier, stay into deep quality sleep, wake up less, and things like that. And ultimately, I'm focusing on this piece of technology because it is the most accurate outside of a lab setting. And that's because it's using something directly on your head, not a wristband, not a ring or something like that. And it's using things like EEG and fNIRs technology. So EEG is referring to electroencephalography, and that is picking up electrical signals inside the brain down to the millisecond. So it's a powerful insight into the dynamic actions of your brain during stress and during sleep and during mental activities, for example. Now, fNIRs is referring to functional near-infrared spectroscopy, and that is measuring oxygenation and blood flow inside the prefrontal cortex, which is essentially giving information on how hard your brain is working in order to complete these tasks and enter into these stages of sleep. So it's giving like an endurance kind of insight into brain activity. So the combo of the two gives extremely good data and feedback for your sleep. And when I say it's more accurate, I mean it. So of course, a lot of devices can be used for a lot of things. And most of these health trackers do claim that they can pick up the stages of your sleep, the quality of your sleep. But as you can imagine, the Muse headband is just a little bit more accurate, or a lot more accurate. So if we compare it to things like Apple Watches or Oura rings, the range and increase in accuracy is anywhere between like 6% to 40% for different stages of sleep. And so if sleep is the ultimate goal, this is the piece of technology I would buy, because it's just going to give you more accurate data, and so you can make more changes based on that data that are actually helping the quality of your sleep. It's very easy to track the length of the sleep. It's very hard to track the quality of your sleep, but the headband doesn't just track it, it also helps kind of gamify the sleep for you and give cues. And it does use functions like soundscapes, like bedtime meditations, bedtime story times, and things called the digital sleeping pill to help improve your sleep. So it's tracking your sleep and helping improve your sleep, so you can use the functions inside the app. So this is a good example of customizing your sleep bedtime routine, but also using technology that is picking up your brainwave activity in real time and using that data to cue you back to sleep. So this is where the digital sleeping pill concept has come from. It's using sounds and like faded cues and volume and things like that to help get you to sleep, find a custom soundscape, meditation, bedtime story that puts you to sleep. But because it has these feedback loops where it's picking up your brainwave activity, when it detects you're kind of entering those brainwave states where you're more alert, it will start to fade in the auditory sound. So say rain noise, for example, that really helps cue your body back into sleep, and so sort of like nips it in the bud before you fully wake up, before you fully even know you are entering those stages of sleep, to try and bring you back down into those slower wave sleeps like theta, for example, or delta, for example, which is again associated with actual sleep, rest, and recovery. So because it's detecting your brainwave activity, it knows when to fade in that sound, and it knows when to fade it back down. So say you've gone back down into those slower wave sleeps, then the music will fade back down and you'll stay asleep. So really cool real-time data that it's picking up and then causing a cue to help you with your sleep. There's also good study to support the use of something like the Muse headband. So there's studies directly using this Muse headband, which is a relatively new piece of technology, and they've noticed about a 20% improvement in quality. But there isn't like a ton of studies using this exact headband. Of course, it's fairly new. So another interesting thing is you could also argue like, oh, I can just put white noise on, for example. But when they did a massive Cochrane review of using just basic white noise, for example, to help with sleep, they've noticed moderate benefits, and a lot of that has to do with the type of the sound and personal factors. So the really interesting utility of something like this headband and the app feature is that you can customize that. You can find, because you're picking up your own sleep data, which sounds actually help with sleep and which sounds might actually impair your sleep. What about the volume? Maybe there is like a sweet spot for volume where it's helpful or harmful for sleep. And so that is the really fascinating aspect about this, is because it's not just using a generic sound for everybody. It's really finding what works best for you, building out this whole data set so that you can really track and understand what's helping. And then you could extrapolate it to other things. So there's a lot of things we do before bedtime to help with sleep, right? There's things like a bedtime bath, a wind down, removing blue lights, getting yourself sleeping into a cooler environment. Maybe you do things like meditation or gratitude practices before bed. You build your perfect bedtime routine. You also want to know if that's translating to better sleep, because some of these things require a lot of effort. So it's really good to understand which are most helpful for you so that you can kind of simplify that process as well. So there's a lot of really cool features and a lot of really good data to be found out to help with people's sleep. And again, this is just going to help you in the long run prevent disease or heal better from the disease you already have. We have the obvious things that sleep helps with, like daytime energy, memory consolidation, better learning, better focus, and how many of us cannot relate to that, right? But of course, with sleep, there's always more that could be done. So if you do want to learn more about some of the supplements you can use for sleep, some of the habits and things like that, please go back and watch my sleep series where I discuss more lifestyle things, dietary things, supplemental things that help with sleep. And between all of these pieces of information, cool tracking and, digital sleeping pills, taking the right supplements, assessing whether your hormones are affecting your sleep, is your stress affecting your sleep, is blue light affecting your sleep, all of these things together are going to help people in some way or another. This is really where we get into custom medicine, individualized medicine, and things like technology can just be a very helpful part of figuring out how to find that sweet spot for a really high, restorative, good quality sleep. So thanks again for listening. If you have any experience or any questions, please comment them below. I really appreciate all of your support, all the likes, the subscribes, the shares. It really does go a long way for keeping this small operation afloat. So thank you again for listening, and I hope you have a fantastic day.